Hi everyone and welcome. I'm David Tasker and today I'm joined by Estrella Resources Managing Director Robert Mencel. Robert, thanks for your time.
Hi, David.
Estrella has identified several compelling drill targets from a drone-based electromagnetic survey at its Ira Miri Project in Timor-Leste, with drilling expected to commence in September. Robert, in simple terms, what has the survey identified and why are you excited by these results?
Yeah, thanks, David. I love to say that we were Einsteins, but I think we fluked this one. We engaged a MTD drone survey a few months ago. We're really just targeting near surface manganese, and so we were focusing on our Ira Miri manganese project and immediate surround. So I think it was 4 by 6 kilometers around that area. And in fact, while we were waiting for that drone survey to occur and some other work to occur, we did spend a lot of time a lot of time exploring our what we call the Lenino dome structure, which is immediately adjacent to Ira Miri. And what happened is we got the data, and we're obviously looking at it for the manganese, the near surface manganese, maybe the first 200 meters or so. But this technology could actually see down to at least 600 meters or so below natural ground level. And what we saw immediately adjacent to this dome area were these screaming targets. And what we're talking about here is something that's obviously conductive. And what really excited me, or what excites me about it, is just the scale of these structures. We always got to drill them, but what we're seeing in the data, and we're lucky that the drone survey was done on 50-meter spacing, so the resolution is very good. What we're seeing is plumes, at depth, and then approaching the surface, and then the kind of the plume-type structures that you'd expect to see. We've identified a lot of, I guess you call them lineaments, or structures and features that potentially could have been pathways for hydrothermal fluids. They seem to coincide with these anomalies, and so as a result, while we've identified a lot of manganese in the area, as a director of a company, we can't ignore this. The shareholders would never forgive me if we didn't stop and just turn left and have a good look at what we've just seen there, because no one had expected that to be there. And what made the story even more compelling was, as I mentioned, we'd spent best part of probably 2 months mapping this area because we thought it was quite prospective anyway. And what we saw was the results that we announced on the 30th of July. We saw high grade copper, we saw nickel sulphides, we saw high-grade silver. And really what we saw is what looks like, what we call zonation. And so if you were to have let's say a porphyry deposit or a epithermal or hydrothermal deposit, as you go away from the source, you'd expect to see this zonation of various minerals dropping out at various locations. And that's what it looks like, what we're seeing at the moment. And then at the very end to get the data and say, wow, there is actually some significant plumes there. And it's fair to say that we've taken a step back and we are looking at all our tenements in a totally different way. And whilst we still need to drill these holes, if we were to be successful, and success for us would mean finding sulphides, it could be pyrite, but it could be other things. It would indicate that the understanding of the geology in Timor-Leste has just taken a big jump to the left, so to speak, because suddenly we're seeing things that weren't supposed to be here, and and possibly weren't that obvious because they were sitting undercover. But beneath the limestone or beneath our non-formations, we're seeing stuff that's much more typical to what you would see in parts of Indonesia or Papua. And it probably should be no surprise because if if you were to get onto Google Earth again and zoom out, it's pretty obvious that this is where it would be. I mean, we're literally surrounded by that kind of structure. I mean, you can look out to Weta, literally from where we are, and there's a similar things. And why we would expect to be different is a good question. And I think we're realizing that we're not different. We're like the rest of the place, and in fact, we're probably even better because we're sitting under this major subduction zone, where the two continental shelves actually collide, and that's where you expect to see that the melt happening as the rocks are undergo depth and pressure, temperature, etc. And we think we're probably sitting directly above it, and that's really exciting. And we think a big part of our tenements in a lot of locations is sitting directly above it.
So I just want to touch on that. The program that you're looking at,
Mm.
3,000 meters,
Yeah,
you touched on what you're looking to test and
yeah.
what success looks like. But
Mm.
these are expected to be the deepest mineral
Yeah,
exploration holes drilled in Timor-Leste. What does that tell
yes.
investors about the broader exploration opportunity here?
Okay. Well, sometimes you want to be the first, sometimes you don't want to be the first. I wish we weren't the first in doing deep holes in Dili, because I think the deepest hole we've drilled so far, and probably on the island, has been probably 130 meters. So we're obviously very mindful of the risks that are involved in this kind of environment. So we're doing a lot of risk management and careful design of our holes. We don't want to encounter. We're not expecting to encounter anything, but we'll make sure that we're taking some precautions just in case we do. What we're hoping to do is get through into basement, into the old crystalline material very, very quickly. And we're hoping that it's what we hope. Well, we're hoping it's what we think it is. Now, these plumes, and it's very hard. I think in the presentation we released earlier a few days ago, it's very hard to show how big these are, because you're talking about a PowerPoint presentation on an ASX announcement. I guess we're fortunate. We have the 3D models. We can take slices. We can fly through it, and to give you an idea, some of these plumes are 1.2 kilometers by 600 meters in area, and most likely 800 meters deep. 800 meters in thickness, in depth, I should say. They're significant plumes. Now, I think we may have spoken about this in the past. What could this be? Could it be graphite? Highly unlikely. Could it be salt domes? Salt, possibly, but normally you'll see that as maybe as a lateral feature. Or could it be sulphides? Or could it be magnetite, iron? So success for us is, not graphite, not salt. Success is, sulfides, preferably, base metal sulfides, or even pyrite. Because even if we hit pyrite, we know that that's a really good sign that there's likely to be other mineralization in the area. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's what's going
But
on.
it does, but it also talks to what you just touched on, that broader exploration opportunity across the portfolio. Um,
Yeah.
as you say, this has changed the thinking somewhat.
It,
Um,
it's
and
a
now,
concept at the moment. It needs to be proven, but the concept, we're trying to kill the concept. We're trying to kill the idea. But at the moment, all the dots, are pretty much lining up, more or less. And if our concept is right, and it really fundamentally changes the whole view of this part of East Timor, because suddenly it's not what it looks like.
and I suppose the thing that investors will be watching
Yeah.
closely will be the drilling timeline, the news
Yes.
flow
Yeah.
milestones. What does that
Yeah.
look like? And what do you expect news flow to be over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, so I think hopefully we'll be able to announce to the market shortly the signing of the sales agreement and the final export approval for our manganese product. So that will be great. I think what you'll see is we'll be announcing some of the IP survey work results that we're doing at the moment. That survey started last month and it's going well and supporting what we're hoping to see with regards to the manganese side. Um, I'm hoping that we'll see in the near future, progress on our limestone project. So I think what you'll see there is our scoping study coming out. We're making good inroads there with potential customers, and hopefully in a position to start announcing that shortly. And then I think with regards to the drilling, I think we'll start drilling in September. Those deeper
How
holes.
quickly, just out of interest, and this is probably the thing that
Yeah,
investors want to know,
yeah,
once drilling starts and you start
yeah,
pulling out core and you
yes,
start seeing the samples, how quickly
yeah,
will you get a guide, not the answer, but a
yeah,
guide that you're onto something? This actually, as much
yeah,
as you've tried to find reasons why the concept can't work,
yes,
and that's part of the geological journey, is actually
yes,
coming up with a concept and then going, let's first gate, did it work? Second gate, did it work? Third gate, did it work? You've moved through all those gates
yeah,
successfully,
yeah,
and there's still the drilling to go. But how quickly do you think you'll get that next gate of
yeah.
actually this could be something big?
Okay, so I think we'll see it as the results come out, as a core comes out. We'll probably drill maybe 20 meters, 20, 30 meters a day. We'll drill 24 hours around the clock because we don't, these are deep holes. We don't risk bogging the rig, the rods. We'll get a good visual indication very quickly. I'd imagine probably within a week of starting, as we get through this cover, and it depends on how quickly we get into this basement rock, I guess, is what we're really targeting. If we're still drilling through, weathered material and muds, etc., well then, that's not going to be great. If after about 100, 200 meters, we're into something a bit more substantial, and we're seeing these really old rocks that we'd expect to see. Yeah, we'll see it, and obviously, well, you can't report to the ASX, but you get a very, very good idea of sulphides. You can generally see the sulphides in the core. It's very hard to zap it with an XRF and get an accurate grade, but we're confident that that we'll know what we're seeing very, very quickly.
So you'll be sitting on the rig, I assume.
I think just about everyone in Timor will be watching this rig, including the government. I suspect it will be one of the
Right.
most watched things. Yeah,
Robert,
to
it looks like an active and potentially important period ahead for Estrella. Thank you for explaining the opportunity, and we look forward to following with interest.
thank you, David.
Estrella trades on the ASX under code ESR. Investors can find further information in the company's latest announcements.